There we go. We appreciate you all for being here today. This is an UpCounty Democrats Breakfast. We do these typically once a month. We've been off the last 2 months, but we're back. So we appreciate you being here for our comeback tour. Um, we're going to be having an excellent panel speak this morning about data centers, particularly data centers here in Montgomery County. We're joined by Montgomery County Councilmember from District 2, Marilyn Balcombe. Shortly, we'll be joined by Senator Katie Fry Hester from District 9A, as well as by Caroline Taylor from the Montgomery Countryside Alliance. Oh, and I see the senator, um, and I'm going to promote you to a panelist. I apologize. I must have sent you the wrong link there. Um, so she's going to rejoin as a panelist, and she'll be here with us in just a moment. Um, but just to get the ball rolling, we think this is a very important issue that folks are interested in hearing about. I know it's something I have a lot of questions about, and so many of you submitted questions. We have uh, about 40 questions that were pre-submitted. So if you pre-submitted a question and we don't get to it today, we will send it to the panelists so they have an opportunity to respond to that at a later date. Um, but don't add it to the chat because we do have it, and we will do our best to get through those questions. If you have a question that you did not pre-submit or has not been asked, um, please put it in the Q&A box, um, and we will try to get to it at the end when we have time. We're also joined by Peter Witzler, who is another member of the UpCounty Democrats board. He's going to be helping me with the Q&A when we get to that portion. But we're going to start off with each of our panelists having about 10 minutes to speak. We're going to start off with Senator Katie Fry Hester and then go to Councilmember Balcombe and then Caroline Taylor from the Montgomery Countryside Alliance. Yes, sorry, go
Sure.
ahead, Caroline.
Question, did the record take? It didn't put a message on the screen, so I just want to make sure that that worked.
It does say it's recording now.
Very good.
Yes. Thank you so much for the question. And if we get more elected officials joining us, I will acknowledge them between speakers. But without further ado, I do want to pass it over to the senator, and the senator can start us off. And I'll let you know when roughly 10 minutes has elapsed, not as like a hard stop, but just as a kind of a heads up. You're muted.
There we go. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me this morning. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Katie Fry Hester, and I represent District 9 in Howard and Montgomery counties, and that includes Damascus, Clarksburg, and the Ag Reserve. In the Senate, I serve on the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee, and I also chair the Energy Subcommittee there. I chair the Senate Rules Committee and the Joint Committee on Cyber, IT, and Biotech. So today we're here to talk about something that's on the top of everybody's minds, right at the intersection of technology, energy, and the environment, and affordability, data centers. Data centers power everything in our daily lives and related to IT. They also have a major economic impact. They bring jobs and expand local tax bases. But as we've seen, their scale also brings real consequences for electric reliability, energy prices, and our environment. And that's where I've done some deep digging this year. It means that we really have to, at the state level and the county level, put smart guardrails in place so that as the growth happens, everyday families aren't left behind to foot the bill. Just for a bit of context, we started, I think it was 2024, no, 2023, at the National Conference of State Legislators in the Natural Resources, Energy, and Environment Committee there. And this committee has 250 legislators from all over the United States. And we started to develop a bipartisan resolution on data centers. And it's got 12 points to it, but we wound up getting it passed in August of 2025, about a year after we started. And the two that are pertinent to this conversation out of all the principles is first, everybody agreed that we should develop cost allocation measures to ensure that large scale energy users pay their fair share. This is following kind of the long-standing principle of, at FERC of cost causation and the beneficiary pays. My cat's trying to say hi. The second is to support opportunities for data centers to contribute to grid stability. So like recognizing that these data centers can actually help with grid stability while protecting local customers. And that resolution was key then in a major debate that we had at PJM, which is the 13-state regional grid operator that includes Maryland and DC. Obviously, the region is under enormous strain. We have electricity demand rising faster than at any point in recent history, driven largely by these data centers. And in parallel, we see the rates are increasing sharply. And so since June 1st, many consumers across the PJM region and many in my district have seen their bills increase upwards of 29%. And it's a complex, it's a complex bill that we all get, but a large part of these price increases in the past year or so have been tied to the capacity auction results. In fact, the independent market monitor found that in the past 2 years, the load growth in the PJM region attributable to data centers has caused billions in excess of capacity costs. And this has been socialized across all of our households and small businesses. At the same time, we're getting closer and closer to that reliability limit that PJM tries to keep us underneath. So last year, it was really good that the PJM started a fast track process called the Critical Issue Fast Path. We call it SIFP for short. It's a mouthful. But the question at hand was how is the region going to integrate 32 gigawatts of new load, over the next several years? Now, 32 gigawatts is the equivalent of adding a city, like a city the size of Philadelphia, to the grid almost overnight. It has never happened before. And so the rules that come out of the SIFI process will determine who pays the hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure that's going to be necessary to bring this 32 gigawatts online, and who gets shut off first if there's not enough power to go around. So those are two really, really, really important questions. And so early analysis found that if nothing changed, which is partly why PJM started the Fast Path process, roughly $163 billion by 2033 would get distributed across the grid, and that would to pay for this 32 gigawatts. So it's 163 billion by 2033, which if you socialize, it equates to about $70 per month for the average household, with much of the windfall profits, of course, going to the existing generators and the data centers. And so it's a real conundrum that we're in. And so because of these stakes, there's a group of us who came together. In parallel, the governors launched the Governors PJM Collaborative, and we launched the PJM State Legislators Collaborative. And we brought together lawmakers from across the region who worked with a bunch of consumer advocates and environmental advocates, and developed something called the Protecting Ratepayers Proposal. So there were, I think by the time the Fast Path process was done, there were 16 or 17 different proposals, and ours was one of them on the board for the commissioners to review. The idea in our proposal was that we were going to allow data centers to connect, but they would remain interruptible, meaning that they wouldn't be calculated in the capacity auction market until they brought their own power supply. And so PJM would stop buying the capacity on behalf of these data centers, and that could save $100 billion by 2033. And that the firm service would be tied to the new supply that they were able to bring to the system. Now, this would not have blocked data centers from coming anywhere in the grid. They could bring their own power, they could use batteries, demand response, whatever they needed to bring their own. But it just meant that the capacity auction prices would not be spread out over families, small businesses, and all the rest of us. And so we had legislators from every state sign on. But unfortunately, our proposal, and in fact, none of the proposals got enough stakeholder votes at the members' meeting at PJM to pass. And this is partially because of the flawed governance structure of PJM. The members committee is pretty darn complex, but that those who have a really large financial stake, like the generators, transmission operators, utilities, they have the most voting power because there's the most of them. And so, anyways, nobody's proposal passed. And just last week, after waiting months, PJM commissioners, they took bits and pieces of the different proposals and announced their plan to submit to FERC. I won't get into too many details, but the good news was that PJM recognized that data centers do cause reliability risk and agreed to protect everyday families from the blackouts if there's not enough power to go around. And so this, we hope, will triage the reliability crisis, but it will not reduce kind of our energy bills going up higher. Because PJM didn't go far enough to require these large loads to pay for their own supply or risk getting turned off, which is what we thought and the ratepayers thought was really, really critical. Another thing in their recommendation was that they do include a fast track process for interconnection to the grid, but it effectively gives special treatment to fossil fuel power plants built for data centers. So they're jumping ahead of all of the other generators that are already in the queue. So anyways, I switched gears. I've switched gears now to focus on the state level, and I just wanted to share two bills with you that relate to this, and then I'm done because I'm probably near my 10 minutes. But the first bill that we've been working on in the Senate is one that focuses on transparency and planning. And so right now, the state does not have a comprehensive picture of how and where these large loads are locating. They go straight to the utilities and straight to the counties. And oftentimes the counties don't even know. And so what the bill does is it creates a large load registry that will require data centers to provide the state in one place with information up front. And this will include some of the load forecasts, the reliability impacts, and any curtailment plans that they have. We then pair this, in the bill, we pair this registry with a voluntary fast track permitting pathway. So this is voluntary, but if the data center agrees to do things like bring their own generation, use clean energy, reuse waste heat, reduce their energy needs in some way, agree to be flexible, then they will get faster treatment at the state level. We also tie our existing state tax credit to this fast track. So right now, any data center can get our state tax credit. And what we're going to say in the bill is that only if you agree to do these things that are good for our communities and good for our energy prices and good for the environment, will you then get the tax credit. We're also exploring the need for state to add a clause in the bill that says basically if PJM assigns the cost and curtailment responsibilities to the load serving entities, which would be the utilities in the state, which is a good possibility they will do this. If they assign it to the load serving entities, then we will require those entities to not pass the cost and reliability risk onto the existing customer base. They will have to be attributed to the entity causing the large load. So that's the first bill. The second bill is a brilliant deep dive into using these data centers as a helpful part of demand response. This is a bill that Delegate Laura Charkoudian has worked on incredibly hard. And I'm cross-filing it in the Senate. And it's based on this Duke University study that found that even most modest flexibility, even modest flexibility from the data centers, like turning off 4 hours during peak demand, could avoid the need for 100 gigawatts nationwide of that new generation. So it's a huge, just because it's only at the very peak times where you need that extra, if all the data centers connect. It's only at the peak times where we really, really have that big problem, which is driving the capacity auction prices up. And so what the bill does is it establishes a voluntary demand response program for these large loads and encourages behind the meter storage and other non-emitting resources. And it creates a priority interconnection path for those projects that bring that flexibility. It also requires new large loads to provide at least a small portion of their demand through storage or new carbon-free resources. So in the very end, it proposes a community benefit fee to support energy assistance and efficiency programs for low-income households. So that is another really interesting bill. I think we're going to see a lot of data center bills. We'll probably have to combine the best components of a bunch of them into one, so they all make sense together. But those are two that I'm actively involved with. So just in closing, I'll say that data centers are coming, whether we like it or not. Um, and I do believe they're critical to national security. Some of them are. But whether they come to Maryland or Virginia or Pennsylvania, it's still going to affect our electricity prices, and it's still going to affect our environment. And so my fundamental policy has been, let's attract the best ones to Maryland so we can get the economic benefit that they bring with them, and try to show that there is a good way to do this. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Senator. I'm going to go to Councilmember Balcombe for the next 10 minutes.
Thank you. And please, Andrew, holler if I go too long, right? I'll try not to. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in on this snowy day early. And also, I appreciate Senator Hester going first, because laying out the complexity of this topic, as she spoke about the grid, it really is a very complicated issue, and it's not even just a state issue. It's this 13-state compact issue for PJM. And also, as she mentioned, so the countywide discussion about data centers just kind of blew up in the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. But the panelists, as well as others on the call, I know Dale Tibbetts is on the call, we've been working on this for years. And so it's, and Caroline will go into detail about, I'm assuming, our project here. So I want to start with the county executive and the Department of Environmental Protection have been working on what potential guardrails would be for data centers in Montgomery County. And they put out a policy statement several weeks ago about recommendations. So what would it look like if we were to legislate what data centers could be and should be? And so, and also at the same time, several of us on the council were looking at, okay, how can we make sure that we don't become Loudoun or even Frederick in terms of allowing data centers where? And so the big question was, where should data centers go? And how can we restrict data centers coming into Montgomery County? And so me, Council President Natalie Fanning Gonzalez, and Councilmember Sales have introduced legislation, a zoning text amendment that would specifically limit data centers. And we know that this is the start of the conversation. We also assume that there will be a corresponding bill that will talk about more operations, but this first step is zoning and how can we restrict data centers in Montgomery County. And so I put the link in the chat for the packet for the bill, and I also put a link in the chat for how to testify on this specific bill. And so what the bill does is it looks at which zoning. Right now, data centers are not even defined in our code. And so we're using this code, the cable communication systems. That's what the data centers in Montgomery County have. And there are very small data centers. There are 3 or 4 very small data centers. And then we have one project in Dickerson on the books, and that's all we've got right now. We want to restrict that. And so the first thing that this bill does is, so somebody can't see my chat. It might have been before the chat was on. Um, defines data centers. So what is a data center? And we codify that. And then very importantly, where should they go? Right now, because it's under the cable communication systems, they're allowed basically anywhere. So this bill restricts data centers to industrial zones only. It also clarifies that it's a condition, it would have to be a conditional use for that zone. And so that what that means is that it's not a by right. The property owner would have to go through a conditional use process to get that data center. And then it talks about several other issues, visual impact, some environmental sensitive areas. There's a buffer for residential areas, a 500-foot buffer. And then also it addresses noise, landscaping, lighting, and generators. Now we know that there are a lot of other aspects to data centers that are not in this bill. And the two primary ones that we get asked about all the time is energy usage and water, right? Both of those are not county specific zoning issues. We know that, and right now, for instance, any data center would have to go to the state, the Maryland Department of Environment for water usage. And then also they have to have a approval is maybe too strong of a word, but from the perspective of the energy in the grid, there is a process that they go by for how much energy they're going to use and how that's going to work. So the things that we can control within the county are, as I mentioned, zoning and conditional use, which are so critical. But then other things have popped up. Caroline mentioned in a conversation about what this does to our sole source aquifer. That perhaps might be an amendment. Another possibility for the bill that will follow is some type of reporting requirements. So for instance, we want to know what the energy usage is. We want to know, for instance, the impact to the river and how much what is the intake of water and outtake. And I'm assuming we'll go over this in terms of the Dickerson project. But the important aspect of the proposed project is the use of water. So the water is in what's called a closed loop system. And so the water that goes into the data center is the same water that goes out of the data center, except for the temperature, which is a very important critical aspect. And there may be some evaporation with that outflow. I know that there are so many questions about data centers, and we can answer as many as we can. There is a public hearing coming up on February 24th. So I also put that link in the chat in terms of how to sign up for the public hearing and how to submit testimony. Your written testimony or your audio testimony is just as important as you coming and testifying for the hearing. So please do that. And then we're also going to try to have as many conversations as possible. So if you're with an organization, please invite me to come, me or my colleagues to come. I will be hosting, as I typically do, a breakfast with Balcombe in February. We'll get that out. And I'm assuming, and we'll have that up in Bellsville in the Ag Reserve. So I'm assuming that a good chunk of that conversation that morning will be about data centers. So I'll let folks know that that's happening. So we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear from the public as this, and we're not going to rush this through. We're going to take our time. We want to hear from you about this. And one of the I guess the emails that we've been getting a lot is that we should be having a public hearing on data centers. And the way to do that is through legislation. We do have certainly town halls and conversations, but to have a public hearing, we need legislation in front of us. This legislation triggers that public hearing. Um, and also of note, there was a hearing for the Dickerson data center in 2024. And I think there was one community rep. Caroline will we'll talk about that. And Caroline has been the front and center in this discussion all along. Also, to that effect, the county executive is hosting a community conversation on the 3rd, Wednesday the 3rd. Is the 4th? Is it? We'll need to check on that. It's Wednesday. Please make sure, and that's going to be in the council office building. He will be presenting his policy paper and hearing from the community. So I think that's it for me. And then questions is really what we need to talk about.
All right. Thank you so much, Councilmember. I'm going to go to Caroline for the next set, and I've made Christina a co-host, so she should be able to um, share the slides.
Screen. Very good. All right, we're going to take a fast trip to Dickerson in the county. I want to thank Katie Fry Hester and Marilyn Balcombe for their good summaries of what they're doing or what they're proposing. And I'm very pleased to be here with this group this morning. Just so you know, this slideshow will be available because I'm going to, given the time constraints, I'm going to roll through this, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. Christina, next slide. All right, we know this, but it's just basics. Again, you'll be able to see this at your leisure. We also have a recording of another presentation with Nature Forward that goes into more detail. What are they? There you see it. Why do we need them? The very reason what we're doing right now. We're all on these devices all the time. So there you go. Next slide. Again, here comes, the rationale, the cloud, our storage. And of course, AI here and barreling towards us even more. Next slide. Here's a list of some of the problems, and we've also talked about the effect on ratepayers. Definitely concerned, and certainly Frederick County is experiencing loss of farmland and other important environmental assets, water use, power needs, undermining climate goals. That's a discussion that I hope that we'll be having as we look at this use being defined and permitted. We've set very ambitious climate goals by 2035 of being carbon neutral. How do those goals how are they uplifted with this use? Financially burdensome, we've discussed it. Next slide. Water use, Marilyn mentioned it. We can't avoid it. And as she mentioned, I have brought up both the aquifer and certainly throughout this process with the Dickerson Terra facility, I talked about the effect on Potomac River, which is the source of water for millions of metropolitan Washington residents. This is a subject we cannot pass off. And it is indeed a subject that we can, in the county, have some effect on. Next slide. All right, so here is how the air might be affected, especially in terms of emissions from any backup diesel generators. Nature Forward provided this information, and on our other webinar, there's much more discussion about the effect on air quality and possible human health effects. Next slide. All right, so we've talked about, and Katie Fry Hester has talked about some of the state initiatives here. Prince George's County has been dealing with this and has regulatory policies being suggested. Frederick County has recommendations, and of course, they are dealing with the overlay zone and a referendum that will hopefully allow the public to decide how many thousands of acres would be given over to this use. And in the last bullet, we're addressing that, as Marilyn mentioned a minute ago. Next slide. And this is what I just referenced, the referendum. Please check out Sugarloaf Alliance if any of you love Frederick County's rural lands, and see if you can help them to bring this to a public vote. This is a big deal. There's much discussion and angst over the loss of so much prime farmland. Next slide. All right, so we're at Dickerson. Here's a map. You'll be able to take a closer look at this when you have a minute. It is a site that used to be the Pepco coal power plant. The total acreage is over 700 acres. The section for data center, which is zoned heavy industrial, would be approximately 300 acres given over to this use. Next slide. So as I said, it used to be the Pepco site, coal, gas. There's a trash incinerator that that provides incineration of all of our trash, and then provides some power to the grid. That is a subject of current conversation. And that is the total acreage that this company purchased in 2022. Next slide. All right, the incinerator, and please look at Sugarloaf Citizens Association to see more information from their perspective on this this facility. We have a composting facility, and of course, Pepco still operates a gas power facility in proximity. Next slide. And there is your 200, it's actually less than 300 acres. 255 acres is heavy industrial. 488 acres is ag reserve land. I'm happy to report, at least I believe this will hold, that the ag reserve portion will not be subject to development for either the data center complex or the battery storage facility, which we'll get to in a minute. That AR portion, there's discussions of putting it into protective easements, including forest and wetland easements. Next slide. So I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what I just mentioned, that we're working on those easements. Hey, it's early in the morning. What can I say? So next slide. All right, so 2024, the Terra Energy proposed data centers for the heavy industrial portion. We, along with our colleagues at Sugarloaf Citizens Association, worked closely with Terra to try to urge balance and collaboration so that this, as Katie Fry Hester mentioned, could be an example of how to do this right. And we had some degree of success in our preliminary discussions, but did not achieve all that we wanted to achieve. Next slide. So to start, Terra is looking at 7 data centers, about half a billion square foot of building space. And they got preliminary approval from the county's Office of Zoning and Administrative Appeals in the fall of 2024. But let me be clear, and I want to be clear, from the beginning, we asked where all the legally required components of this application for conditional use under cable communications were, including site plan. And we were told, hey, this is a general approval. We'll get to that later. And in fact, when we raised issues about water, diesel power, the attorney for Terra asked that our concerns, our testimony be stricken from the record. Fortunately, the hearing examiner did not do that. Next slide. So we achieved 2 things with Terra when they got their preliminary approval for this concept plan. One is that we were able to have a condition that no diesel generators would be used for backup power, and which was a big one in terms of how many diesel generators would be required as a backup for a facility that large. Next slide. Oh, and the other thing we achieved was that they cannot use the sole source aquifer for cooling their facility. So part of this project also is probably one of the largest battery backup facilities that will be supplying backup for the grid in that area. It'll be about 12 acres. It's going to look something like what you see in this photograph. And it is now, after the passage of SB 931, this use is not subject to conditional use approval. So regardless of what Montgomery County and the hearing examiner would say, this would be permitted just through PSC, Public Service Commission approval. Next slide. We ask questions. How would this affect federal parkland? It is proximate, quite close to the C&O Canal, and that, of course, is visited by 5 million people annually. I hope those questions are asked when we go to the next phase of approval of this facility. Next slide. So Atmosphere is the company that has been tapped to move forward with this application for what's called a major modification before the Office of Zoning and Administrative Appeals. This is the phase where Tara, I gather, but I haven't seen the application, it's not public yet, is going to bring in the details. How many square feet, how many what is the site plan? Where are they located? Adequate public facilities, water consumption, etc. This project will host to start 30 clients. Atmosphere has said, and we hope that this is true, that it aspires to become the world's greenest data center. We'd like to hear more about that. We'd like to hear more about what we are told is a very advanced cooling system that takes water from the Potomac River and returns it at roughly the same temperature without, as I was told, with zero loss of water. I've asked about this system multiple times. I've been told there's a non-disclosure agreement. Personally, I don't think that's acceptable as we move through this process. I believe we need to know those details. As I've mentioned, the river provides drinking water for many and is already experiencing algal blooms due to climate change. So we want to make sure that the temperature returned is not going to exacerbate that issue. So this is a public process. You will be able to testify or provide comment. I'm hoping not to be the only one in the hearing room next time because it was lonely there. If all is approved, ground will be broken for this project within in about 2 years. Next slide. And how am I doing for time, folks? Am I all right? All right. You yell at me, Andrew, if I'm going over.
I will yell at you, but we're getting close, but I'll yell at you.
Okay. All right. So I've talked about the battery storage facility. Next slide. Again, we brought up water, fire risk, the battery storage facility. We've got to be very careful because those suckers can catch fire and they're hard to put out. So we're going to make sure that that is not an issue there. The regulatory framework, we're working on that. The details, apparently they're coming. And the economic research, Katie Fry Hester and her folks, while we're working on that too. Next slide. And this is the point of the river being used for their cooling. Next slide. See, I'm moving through this quickly. Hey, I don't know if you all know this, but up to this snowfall, we were in a drought. We've been in a drought for a while. Moreover, all of our water sources, due to climate change, are going to be under extreme pressure. And by 2030, according to the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, we may not have enough water with current systems to provide everyone what they need. So we need to pay attention to water. And we can, in this particular use, we can employ conditions, regardless of MDE approval processes, on the withdrawal and use of water for this particular use. Next slide. Hey, when you have time, learn about the Piedmont Sole Source Aquifer. Believe it or not, the Ag Reserve, a third of the county is served by groundwater wells. It's the only economically viable source of water we have. There's no reasonable likelihood of spending the ridiculous amount of money to stretch WSSC out to where we are, so we need to protect it. It's on our website, the Good Gift program, to learn more. It's a highly it's a very high quality water source and it's worth protecting. Next slide.
We're about 10 minutes, just a heads
All
up if you want to sort of move into.
Jim, I'll wrap it up. There's more on the aquifer. Next one. More on water. Next one. See how fast I'm going here? This is sad to me because water is my issue and I think it needs to be our issue. Next slide. All right, next slide. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. And here's the transparency issue that we hope will be resolved at the major modification. So Christina, just slide through a couple to the last slide where we, great players, we already did that. Okay, so next slide. All right, that's the last one. So what I want to say right now is that before the council, there are actually two proposals. Well, three if you count the county executive's regulations that we'll be discussing. One of them is what Marilyn has brought up. The second one is from Councilmember Evan Glass's office, who is trying to have us do a study, which is not an unreasonable ask, I have to say. The question is, can we dovetail these particular quests to make sure that whatever's happening with the zoning text amendment and regulations is the best we can do in this county? The people in the county deserve it. Our environment deserves it. And Montgomery Countryside Alliance is going to be providing comments on both the zoning text amendment and Councilmember Glass's proposal and the county executive's regulation in conjunction with our colleagues at the Climate Action Coalition, Sugarloaf Citizens Association, and our agricultural colleagues at the Farm Bureau and Montgomery Agricultural Producers. More on our website. And again, I appreciate your patience in all these words. This has been a big issue. It's been lonely up until recently, as Marilyn said, over the last couple of months, where it's been a fire hose of interest and issues, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate all of you for being here. Before I go to Peter to start bringing some of the questions, I do want to acknowledge the various elected officials who have joined since we started. So I'm just going to run through this list, and if I miss anybody, message me. We have Montgomery County Council Member at large, Evan Glass, Mayor of Gaithersburg, Judd Ashman, Link Hoeing of I think previously on the Poolesville Town Council, now Chair of Western Montgomery. Forgive me, I'm missing the name, but Marilyn can correct me if I'm on that one. Of
Fair Access Committee.
Fair Access. Thank you. Fair Access Committee for Western Montgomery County. Yep. Krista Tichy from the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee, Jim Brown, who's on the Poolesville Town Council, Delegate Lily Chi from District 15, go District 15, Jamil Hernandez from the Gaithersburg City Council, Yvette Monroe, a former member of the Gaithersburg City Council, Scott Goldberg, former member of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee, and Chow Wu, delegate from District 9A. So thank you so much. I appreciate you letting me read all of those names out. I'm going to go now to Peter, who's going to pull some of the pre-submitted questions.
Yeah, hi everybody. We will try to get to as many of these questions as possible. We've only got about 17 minutes left in our scheduled program, so we might not be able to get to all of them, but we'll be sure to share all the questions that we do have with our panelists if they want to, try to reach out to folks individually. So I'll start with one, which is from Ellie, who is one of our leaders on the UpCounty Dems, but is unable to join. I think she's traveling. But I don't understand where the economic benefit to the county or state comes from with data centers. Yes, there are construction jobs in the beginning, but once built, I believe it takes few people to run the centers, so not much permanent job creation. So are there specific taxes that they pay? Does Maryland or Montgomery County suffer if we don't build data centers?
I'll take
whoever
that
wants
one.
to take that.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Pete, thanks. So you're right about the jobs. This is not this is not high job intensity, other than the construction jobs. But there is a significant personal property tax revenue, and that's the benefit of from the county is the tax revenue, and the issue is that the equipment inside the data center has a significantly high value, and that's the personal property tax.
Great. Any other additions to that from Carolyn or Senator Hester? Okay. Well, so th this is another question that was submitted actually in advance by Dan at Conway, is just about the cost to taxpayers, and I'll just take a brief moment to editorialize on that. Is my understanding of why data centers are so popular in Virginia and Ohio and other states is that there are fairly large tax incentives to offer to companies to build there. So I wonder if there's any thing you can share about any state tax incentives or tax abatements, tax credits, tax refunds, or anything like that in terms of costs that haven't been talked about yet.
So I was
Good, Senator Hester.
trying to find the exact, I'll have to look at the comptroller's got a fact sheet, but basically I think it was 2020 or 2021, the state passed a tax credit for qualified data center, and that eliminates from the sales and use tax a bunch of this stuff that's on the inside of these data centers. And so what my first bill will do is it will limit those data centers that can get that tax credit to those that are registering with the large load registry and providing this transparency and doing one of the multiple things that will help us out, whether it's demand flexibility or bringing their own generation or buying clean energy. So if I can find it, Andrew, I'll put the link to the comptroller's fact sheet in the chat.
Great. Thank you. And so we have a question. I think he may not be live with us anymore. Sorry, it's been a while since I've moderated a Zoom with all the windows, so I'm a little rusty, excuse me. But David Griffith submitted a question that you should be able to see in the Q&A portion as well, and asked the benefits of data centers that were mentioned are universal no matter where you live, cloud, AI, etc. And the negative impacts are local, so huge uses of potable water, spiking electricity prices, etc. What, if any, benefits of data centers are there to the local communities in which they're located?
I think what I would add, and then I'd love to hear what the county reps have to say, is that first of all, the costs are not all localized. These energy costs, like we are right now paying for the Loudoun County data centers because we're paying for the Piedmont Reliability Project, which is transmission, like effectively cutting from Pennsylvania to Virginia through Maryland, and we are all going to have to pay for that. So and that's just the transmission. The capacity prices, we're also all paying for. So the problem is that no matter where these data centers go, we wind up paying on the energy side. What was the second part of the question, Andrew?
Just the real question is just what, if any, benefits are there to the specific local community?
Oh, well, I would turn that back over to the county. There are
Yeah.
some local benefits. I keep hearing that in Loudoun County, their streets are paved with gold over there.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I think that the senator's response is it's so important to I think it's the biggest um, uh, misunderstanding about the energy cost because of Maryland's energy, Montgomery County's energy is not isolated. We are in this 13 state group, and that if the data center is in Loudoun or Frederick or Prince George's or Pennsylvania, it's all part of this discussion about the increase of the cost of electricity, of energy. And that's really important. It's not as easy as Montgomery County saying, we don't want data centers in Montgomery County because we don't want our energy bills to go up. So I think that's a common misunderstanding. And then just to go back to what is the benefit of the data center, I also mentioned the revenue, the tax increase or the tax revenue. But there's also this issue of whether we can disallow something in our community. that is a part of our infrastructure. So I understand that people don't like AI, they don't want to use AI, but everybody is using data, and it is part of our infrastructure. And whether we're using it, Montgomery County's data sits in Loudoun County, so we all use data, and it's whether you appreciate it or not, it's part of our infrastructure.
So if I might add, I do think something that we had been asking for during the Terra project deliberations or the early ones is a clear-eyed, accurate cost benefit analysis for this use. The Terra Energy folks indicated that, and I don't know that they've pursued this further, that they wanted to be zeroed out on the county's energy tax. And they had some dazzling numbers in terms of the other tax revenue that might come in versus what would be lost or what we all of us pay, which is energy tax. I have asked and I have yet to receive any numbers on what the real benefit to zeroing out that and relying on the other taxes. But there are other costs that are hard to quantify but must be part of this discussion, and those are environmental and human health costs, and they should be part of a reasonable cost benefit analysis.
Yeah, and I appreciate that from the perspective of what really is that revenue, and we haven't seen that those numbers either.
Thank you so much. Peter, I don't know if you want to hop in with another question, or I can just pull from the list as well. But we had a number of questions that were sort of Montgomery County specific and had to do with impacts to roadways. So we had one in particular where someone was asking about what impact the construction of the data center is going to have on the agricultural reserve immediately around it, and on the road, given that there's limited current road infrastructure. What is the build out going to look like? So I can pass that to the council member and Caroline as well if you have some thoughts.
So, as you know, we have protected rural roads in the ag reserve, and there has been no mention of changing those roads in terms of the construction. Keep in mind that this site it was a heavy industrial, and so part of the advantage of this site is the infrastructure that's in place. But we would certainly protect our rural roads in that regard. Caroline, I don't know if you've had conversations about that.
I think again, in the effort to make this, best possible, there is rail transportation proximate to the site, and in my opinion, it should be a request at least that they bring in a lot of their materials through rail, as opposed to bringing the heavy loads down what is an exceptional rustic road, Martinsburg Road. But that can be part of the discussion before OZA, I think.
Thank you so much, Peter. Do you want to jump in with?
Yeah, I'll have another one. So from Dinesh Malavidal. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. But given that the current industrial zoning does not prohibit the construction of data centers, will the proposed Dickerson data center project and any other pending data center proposals be paused until a final determination on the Montgomery County Council's zoning text amendment is reached?
At this point, there's no conversation about a pause. I guess we only have one proposal at this point in time for this one specific site, and that's the reason why we're putting this ZTA together now. Is that we want to be very clear that the industrial zone is the only place that we would be interested in having data centers in the county. with all the caveats attached to those data centers. And that.
Yeah, news item, Monday news item. Consensus seems to be emerging amongst a number of groups in the county that a pause on this use pending answering the appropriate questions and putting in place the appropriate guardrails would be appropriate. That's just news. I don't know what formal requests will come, but that's something that emerged over the last several days.
Thank you so much. Peter, I can pull one more from the
Yeah, why
chat
don't you?
unless
Yeah,
there's,
we've got 5 minutes left. Go ahead.
yeah. So there was one that was submitted. I appreciate the ZTA to restrict land use until greater vetting can occur. Given that 70% of PJM energy costs come from fossil fuels, what is being done at the state level to add more accountability on data centers and PJM to increase the reliability on renewable energy? It's definitely a cost issue, but also an environmental stewardship issue. Can we add language on this at the county level? So this is both a state question and a county question. I believe this one was from, well, let me just pull that up. But I copied it and I didn't write the name down, but I'll get the name. I apologize. Senator, if you want to go first and then, or
Yeah,
whichever of you wishes to go first.
I would just say that there was the critical bill last year that had a statewide study that unfortunately the governor vetoed, and we overrode that veto in December. And so now that study will move ahead. In terms of, renewable or clean energy, and I think you have to include demand response also, because if you're not using energy, it's also it can save the environment and stuff. But anyways, we haven't done anything specifically related to data centers yet, but we're expecting to see a flurry of bills. And I know that mine won't be the only one. So I would expect in the next 2 weeks or so that some of the text will come online, and I'll drop my email in the chat again. But please feel free to email us, and we'll send you things as soon as we see them.
And go ahead, Councilmember, if you have
So
something
I
to add
just
there.
wanted to mention, when we looked at the county executive's policy recommendations, there is information about energy. And for us, we did not put that in the bill originally just because of the complexity and the interplay with the state, and that the state is looking at these options. So right now we're looking at what the state is going to do on this, because it really, the energy, what we do in Montgomery County is just a tiny, tiny portion of what's happening in the state and in the region.
Thanks so much. And that question, if the record came from Prabhu Selvam. So thank you for submitting that question. We are just about at time. The questions that were submitted that we did not get to today, I'm going to send along to our panelists. So they'll have an opportunity to respond to those with the emails attached to them. But we appreciate you all for tuning in. I'm going to allow each of our panelists, if they want one final word, to jump in, and then I'll say our thank yous. Senator, we'll start with you and we'll go back around the same way.
Well, I just want to thank you, Andrew, and the UpCounty folks for inviting me to join today, and my co-panelists. I think it really needs to be a strong collaboration, and I would say at the county level, the state level, and the PJM level. And there are people working on this across the board. I think it's going to be, because you've got both the risks and the opportunities of these things. It's likely to be, a large fight in the Senate this year, and would really welcome anybody who wants to come help push for transparency and for increasing, shifting the tax credit to the types of data centers that we want. Encourage you to just sign up and come on down to Annapolis, because I know that the big tech will be there.
And I'll say the same thing. We've got a public hearing coming up on the 24th for both my bill and Councilmember Glass's bill. And then the community conversation on Tuesday, the 3rd, that's with the county executive's office. And then I'll have my standard meetings out in the community. But please invite us to come to your organization events and be in touch with my office. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank-
much.
Thanks again for inviting me to join. Thanks to my colleague, Christina Bostic. And important to note is to stay plugged in. Feel free to join our newsletter. Make sure you're signed up for your council members' newsletters and your state reps. And I do want to say that the thing that I see almost every day now is the effect on ratepayers. And there will be a ratepayer revolt if we don't address these important issues. These are real issues for people who are ill-placed to pay what even now they're having to pay per month for their electrical uses. People will suffer if we don't address this. So thank you very much for the time.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists, Councilmember Marilyn Balcombe, Senator Katie Fry Hester, and Caroline Taylor of the Montgomery County Countryside Alliance. And thank you, Peter Witzler, for doing the questions this morning. And thank you, most importantly, to all of you, the attendees who came today to listen in. There's almost 80 people here. There's actually more than 80 people here now on a Monday morning at 7:30. So we really appreciate you all for joining us. We'll send these questions along to our panelists. Again, this has been the UpCounty Democrats Breakfast, this first Monday of every month. We do these, and we will send the recording out, yes, to everyone who showed up today. That might not be for another day or two. We got to process that. But thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you.